He was a millionaire's son who had never taken a single step in his life until a mysterious new maid walked into the mansion and did what doctors, specialists, and millions of dollars couldn't. What she revealed next left the entire estate speechless, and no one who hears this story ever walks away the same. The Langston estate perched like a monument on the hillside, white stone gleaming beneath the August sun. Its gardens sprawled in every direction, meticulously pruned, fountains murmuring in marble basins, hedges carved into swans and angels. Yet behind the grandeur, silence ruled. Inside the manor, 10-year-old Elias Langston sat motionless in his wheelchair, a boy with thick lashes, pale skin, and eyes too old for his age. His world was the corner room on the second floor, a place of custom-built shelves, soft lighting, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the garden. But no matter how golden the morning or how blue the afternoon sky, Elias never ventured beyond the walls. Not funny. He had not walked a single step in his life. Doctors from Europe, Asia, and the finest clinics in America had diagnosed him with hypotonia, low muscle tone, but that explanation never satisfied his father. For Leonard Langston, a man who had built empires from blueprints and bulldozers, there was always a solution. He just hadn't bought the right one yet. Nurses came and went. Therapists tried and failed. Specialists left behind charts, videos, and soft-spoken apologies. They all departed eventually, often replaced by newer, more optimistic faces that promised nothing but left with defeat. Until Maria arrived. She didn't come from a hospital. She wasn't sent by any agency. She came through the side gate on a Wednesday morning with a battered suitcase and a reference handwritten on yellow paper. She was offered a housekeeping job, nothing more. "You'll be cleaning upstairs," said Mrs. Caldwell, the head housekeeper, in her crisp English accent. Who? "And keep your voice low around Master Elias. He doesn't like noise." Maria nodded, her dark eyes soft but unreadable. She was small and lean, the kind of woman who looked older than her age because life had not been gentle. Her hair was tied back in a neat bun, and she wore plain shoes, no jewelry, no makeup. The first time she saw Elias, he was sitting by the window, his legs draped in a woolen blanket, hands folded in his lap. He didn't turn his head when she entered to dust the shelves. "Ugh, you don't need to pretend I'm not here," he said, voice thin and cool. Maria paused. "I wasn't pretending, just didn't want to bother you." He glanced at her then, brief but assessing. Most staff looked away when he stared. Maria didn't. She held his gaze, without flinching. "I don't like people talking to me, and then I'll keep quiet." She returned to dusting, methodical and silent. But Elias watched her through the mirror on the opposite wall. There was something different about her movements, gentle, unhurried, almost like she was dancing with the room. The next day, she returned with a small bundle of wildflowers tucked into a jam jar. She set them on the windowsill without a word. "Those aren't from the garden," Elias said. "No, they're from the woods beyond the gate." "I've never been there." She only smiled, wiping down the glass. By the end of the first week, Elias was speaking more. Not long conversations, but short, clipped comments about books he liked, chess moves he had learned, birds he saw from the window. Maria always responded with care, never pushing, never pushing, never probing. One afternoon, he asked, "Why do you work here?" "This place isn't friendly. I needed work," she said simply, "and something told me I was meant to be here." Elias squinted at her. "You believe in fate, I believe in quiet signs." Their conversations grew. By the second week, she was reading aloud while folding his clothes or dusting the corners. She didn't read children's books, but old poetry and fables from her village in the south. Strange stories about animals who wept in stones that could sing. Elias began to laugh. Maria's presence was gentle but firm. She wasn't afraid to correct the cook when the soup was too salty or scold the butler when he snapped at a gardener. But she was never unkind, only precise. One evening, a storm swept over the hillside, knocking out the power. Thunder cracked like a whip and whined clawed at the shutters. The staff scrambled for candles, murmuring anxiously. In Elias's room, the boy sat alone, watching the dark sky churn. Maria entered without knocking, carrying a single lantern. I don't like the dark, Elias admitted. Then neither do I, she said, sitting beside him. But the dark is honest. It shows who we are when we think no one's looking. The next morning, something strange happened. Maria found a drawing on the floor, crayoned lines, shaky but determined. It showed a stick boy sitting beneath a crooked tree. The legs were uneven, but they were there. She didn't mention it. She only picked it up, smoothed it out, and left it on the desk. Later that day, Elias said, My legs aren't dead, you know? I can feel them. Maria knelt beside him. Then maybe they're just sleeping. He turned to her, mouth half open. Do you think they could wake up? Her eyes gleamed. We'll think anything can wake up if it's spoken to gently enough. That night, Elias asked her to stay a little longer before leaving. The mansion felt different in the days that followed. Less like a mausoleum, more like a house. Staff began to smile more. The gardens bloomed richer. Even Leonard Langston, who spent most days locked in his study barking into phones, noticed. Who's the new maid? He asked one evening, peering from the balcony as Maria led Elias's wheelchair into the sunlight. Mrs. Caldwell adjusted her gloves. Maria, she's unconventional. She's unconventional. Leonard narrowed his eyes. Unconventional how? She talks to him. Really talks. Leonard watched in silence. Elias was laughing. Sunlight in his hair, his thin hands waving as he spoke. Maria was listening, nodding, leaning close. For the first time in years, Elias looked like a boy. But not everyone in the house was pleased. That night, while Maria was scrubbing the stair railings, Mrs. Caldwell approached her. You're getting too close, she said, voice low. Maria didn't stop scrubbing. Too close to what? It's what isn't yours to fix. Maria stood slowly. And who decides that? Mrs. Caldwell didn't answer. She only turned, heels tapping against the floor, vanishing down the corridor. The next morning, Elias wasn't by the window. His bed was empty, the wheelchair untouched. Maria's heart tightened. She ran to the hall, calling his name, but the house was too quiet until she heard a soft thud from the far end of the hallway. She sprinted, and there, sprawled on the marble tiles beneath the grand staircase, was Elias, his legs tangled, eyes wide with shock. His hands trembled against the floor. I tried to stand, he whispered, voice cracking. I thought I could. Maria dropped to her knees beside him, heart pounding. But she didn't scold him. She didn't panic. She whispered, You did? Maria helped Elias sit upright, cradling his trembling frame against her shoulder. His body was thin, bird-like, his breaths coming fast and shallow. You stood, she whispered again, even if just for a second. Elias's eyes welled with something fragile. Fear, pride, maybe both. It didn't feel like standing. It felt like falling. First. The moment didn't last. Footsteps thundered down the hallway. Mrs. Caldwell, red-faced, Leonard behind her, his silk tie askew. What happened? Leonard's voice boomed. Maria didn't flinch. He tried to stand. Leonard's gaze dropped to Elias, who was looking down, ashamed. Is he hurt? No, Maria said firmly. I just shaken. Leonard stepped forward, fists clenched. You should have been watching him. I was cleaning. He moved on his own. Leonard turned to his son, jaw tight. You don't do that without a doctor present. You don't do anything reckless, understood? Elias's lower lip trembled. He nodded. Leonard turned away, muttering something about liability. He gestured for the butler. It is Dr. Emmy here. Now, that afternoon, Elias's room was stripped of anything that hinted at progress. The wheelchair was checked, adjusted, reinforced. A second nurse was assigned to watch him at night. Maria was reassigned to the kitchen until further notice, but Elias wouldn't speak to anyone, not to the new nurse, not to the butler, not to his father. Only Maria. She visited in secret, late at night, slipping in after the halls were quiet. She sat by his bed and whispered stories of wolves who taught themselves to sing, of broken statues who learned to walk. Elias asked, Was it wrong of me to try? No, Maria whispered. It was brave. The weeks passed. Dr. Remy, a man with silver-rimmed glasses and a tired smile, examined Elias 3 times a week. He measured muscles, adjusted braces, nodded with polite discouragement. It's a neurological block, he told Leonard. If there's been any change, it's psychosomatic. Leonard frowned. Meaning? Emotion, belief. But that kind of improvement doesn't last. Don't get your hopes up. Leonard didn't respond. He just turned. He just turned and stared out the window, where Maria, now restricted to cleaning floors, was scrubbing the stone steps with steady hands. One night, Elias pressed his palms into the mattress. I don't want to just sit anymore. Maria leaned closer. Then don't. But how? Every time... Yeah, tell me I'm dreaming. Dreams are where change begins. He looked up. They began in secret. Each morning, before dawn, she unlocked his door with a pin she kept hidden in her shoe. She'd remove the nurse's soft restraints and lift Elias gently from his bed. They practiced standing with her arms around him, his hands clutching hers like lifelines. At first, it lasted only seconds, then longer. By the second week, Elias could stand for nearly a full minute with Maria's support. By the third, he could take a single step. They worked in silence, the room dim, the air thick with effort. Elias never cried, though sweat beaded at his temples and his teeth clenched with pain. You're stronger than you think, Maria whispered. You always have been. But word in the house traveled like wind. The young scullery boy, Michael, had seen Elias standing near the window, Maria at his side. Mrs. Caldwell called her to the office the next day. You were told not to interfere. Maria met her gaze. And if I hadn't, the boy could have been hurt. Or worse. Maria stood her ground. Or he could walk. Or he could walk. Mrs. Caldwell's face turned to stone. Pack your things. You're dismissed. Leonard found out an hour later. He stormed into Caldwell's office. You dismissed her without speaking to me? She overstepped. She made him stand. Caldwell hesitated. She broke protocol. Leonard cut her off. I've paid millions to specialists who gave me nothing but charts. Saga. That woman brought life back into my son's eyes. She's just a maid. Leonard's face darkened. Oh no, she's something else. He reversed the dismissal. Maria stayed, but the household was no longer passive. Some staff whispered about her behind closed doors, called her a fraud, a witch, a liar who preyed on hope. Others admired her, quietly cheering when she passed. One afternoon, as Maria helped Elias down the hall with a walker, a door creaked open and Leonard stepped out. He stared at his son, frozen in place. Elias braced himself, but Leonard only knelt slowly and opened his arms. Elias stumbled forward and fell into them. They stayed that way, father and son, in the quiet hush of marble and sunlight. That evening, Leonard invited Maria to his study. He poured himself a drink, then looked at her over the rim of the glass. Who are you, really? Maria paused. Just someone who listens.
To what? To what?
He doesn't, he will stop hearing. Leonard was silent. Then he asked, do you believe he'll walk? I do. Why? Maria smiled softly. Because he believes it now. Leonard downed the drink and nodded. He nodded, even Maria, too. Days turned into weeks. Elias graduated from walker to crutches. Then briefly to nothing at all. Maria built games into the therapy. Hopscotch made from rugs, slow dancing in the middle of the room, balancing books on his head while counting out loud. You're making me into a fool? Elias groaned one morning. A brave one, she replied. By mid-autumn, the leaves on the estate burned gold. Elias walked across the garden, without support, for the first time. Staff gathered in hushed awe, watching the boy who had once been motionless become something unstoppable. Leonard stood at the edge, tears tracking down his weathered face. But storms never stay far from miracles. That evening, while Maria swept the porch, a car pulled up, a sleek black sedan with tinted windows. 2 men stepped out. One wore a navy suit, the other a white coat. They were from the Langston Foundation Medical Board. Leonard had once funded their spinal research. They had heard about Elias's impossible progress. The suited man smiled coldly. We're here to evaluate the maid's methods and whether they hinge her. Leonard frowned. She's not a method. She's a person. Even so. For liability's sake. For liability's sake. Maria, watching from the shadows, felt a chill crawl down her spine. She knew this kind of storm. The kind that comes smiling, the kind that doesn't knock. It breaks down doors. And they were about to open one Elias had only just learned to close. The board representatives moved swiftly, disguising scrutiny as polite conversation and thin smiles. They asked to review Maria's techniques, her credentials, any formal training. She had none. Her reference had come from a woman named Reina Torres, a name no one on the foundation board recognized. No one on the foundation board recognized. Dr. Harlan, the man in the white coat, wore the kind of expression that never fully believed in miracles, especially not the kind that came from maids with soft eyes and steady hands. I'm appreciate your efforts, he said, scribbling notes with surgical efficiency, but from a legal standpoint, the boy's improvement must be properly documented, replicable, scientifically sound. Maria didn't argue. She never raised her voice. But she met his gaze with a quiet strength that made even Dr. Harlan pause. You can measure what you like, she said, but Elias is not a specimen. He is a boy who's learning how to live. That night, Maria wasn't allowed to tuck Elias in. A staff nurse stood guard outside his room while the boy lay awake, eyes wide in the dark. When Maria passed by in the hallway, he whispered through the gap in the door, "Are they going to send you away? I don't know." She whispered back, "Won't let them." She smiled, even though it hurt. "You just learned to stand. That's enough rebellion for one season." Elias leaned closer. "Then teach me how to fight." In the days that followed, the board ordered evaluations, muscle scans, balance tests, psychological interviews. Elias was poked and questioned until the light in his eyes dulled again. He began stammering when asked to walk. He froze under fluorescent lights. His legs trembled, not from weakness, but fear. Maria watched from a distance, forbidden for private time with. But on the fourth night, just past midnight, she found Elias sitting on the cold marble steps outside his room, arms wrapped around his knees. "You're not supposed to be out here," she whispered. I couldn't sleep. She sat beside him. "Want me to tell you a story?" He nodded, so she told him one she hadn't shared before. There was once a boy who lived at the bottom of a well. The world above was full of color and music, but he could never reach it. Every day, people would lower ropes with advice tied to them. Books, medicines, instructions, but no one ever climbed down to sit beside him. She paused. One day, a girl dropped in. She didn't say much, just sat there with him. At first, he was angry, thought she was mocking him. But she stayed, day after day, until he forgot. Then one morning, without realizing it, the boy stood up, and the walls of the well were gone. Elias blinked slowly. Oh, was the well real? Maria looked straight ahead. Pain always is, but sometimes so is the way out. The next morning, Elias refused the nurse's help. "I'll walk on my own," he said. The nurse panicked. "Sir, you need clearance." Leonard arrived before the shouting escalated. He raised a hand. "I'll let him." The staff and board watched as Elias stepped forward, arms out slightly for balance, one foot in front of the other. His back straight. His knees trembling, but not giving in. He made it to the end of the hall. Then he turned and walked back. Dr. Harlan said nothing. He just adjusted his glasses and scribbled faster. The board requested an emergency meeting in the Manor's drawing room. Leonard sat at the head of the table. Maria was asked to wait outside. "She's not licensed," Dr. Harlan began. "There's no proof her influence is safe." Leonard slammed his hand on the table. "You watched my son walk. After 10 years of failed experts, hospitals, specialists, and you want to argue paperwork? A progress must be protected," another board member said carefully, not left to intuition and emotion. Ishi gave him hope. "That's more than any of you did. Taya Ishi's dangerous." Dr. Harlan muttered, "Her presence encourages non-compliance." Leonard leaned in. Son was never broken. You just never listened. They voted. 4 against Maria, 3 in favor, 1 abstention. The verdict was delivered that evening. She had to leave. Maria didn't protest. She simply packed her single suitcase, the same one she arrived with, and folded each garment carefully. She didn't cry, but her hands moved slower than usual, as if her body were grieving even if her face wasn't. As she descended the staircase, Elias appeared at the landing. "No," he said, voice shaking. "They can't." Maria paused. "I'll talk to my father," he said. "I'll talk to the board." She shook her head. "It's not your fight. Not yet. Then I'll run away." Maria smiled. "You only just learned to walk." "I don't care." He limped toward her, took her hand. "Don't go." "I have to." "Oh, I have to." "Why?" "I have to." "Why?" "Because sometimes the miracle leaves, so you can learn how to keep walking without it." Tears filled his eyes. "You were never the miracle." She brushed the hair from his forehead. "On neither were your legs." And then she was gone. The house dimmed after that. Staff whispered less. The laughter stopped. Elias walked still, but rarely smiled. He ate in silence, played chess without interest, The light in his eyes flickered but did not go out. Until 1 week later, a letter arrived for him. It was hand-delivered by a courier with no name, sealed with twine and a wax stamp pressed into the shape of a tree. Inside was a map. A single sheet drawn in black ink with winding paths and shaded forests. In the corner, a note. "There are things they will never find in books. Come see." Elias held the map in shaking hands. He looked out the window, toward the tree line beyond the estate. Then he walked to his closet, pulled on his coat, and packed a small bag. No one saw him leave. But by the time they noticed he was gone, he was already halfway through the woods, following the trail inked in her hand. Each step faster, steadier. And deep in those woods, far from polished halls and medical charts, someone waited, someone who hadn't left, someone who had known he'd come. The woods beyond the Langston estate were older than the town itself. Untamed and thick with branches like twisted fingers, the forest breathed with its own rhythm. Birds quieted when the wind changed, and shadows moved even when nothing else did. Elias followed the map with determined steps, boots crunching over fallen leaves. The trail Maria had drawn wasn't marked in the real world. There were no signs, no mile markers, only soft clues. A mossy boulder shaped like a lion's paw, a crooked birch with a red ribbon tied around its middle, the faint smell of smoke from wood fires. His legs ached by the 3rd mile. But he didn't stop. At last, near the edge of a quiet glade, he saw the outline of a cottage. Tiny, crooked at the roof, tucked behind ferns and wild vines. Light flickered through the windows, and smoke spiraled from the chimney. He hesitated only once, then walked up and knocked. The door opened almost instantly. Maria stood there, her expression unreadable, eyes wide with the kind of surprise that carried too many feelings to name. "You followed it," she whispered. "I would have followed you without a map." Her eyes shimmered. "You're not supposed to be here. I don't care." She stepped aside. "Then come in." The inside of the cottage was nothing like the Langston estate. The walls were uneven. The floor creaked. The kitchen was little more than a stone hearth and a table covered in mismatched bowls. Herbs hung from the beams. Books lined every wall, most with spines so faded they looked blank. Elias sat carefully. His legs were sore, but he didn't collapse like before. "You walked this whole way?" Maria asked. He nodded. "No crutches, just me." She knelt in front of him, took his hands in hers. "You shouldn't have had to." "You didn't either," he said. "But you came anyway." She smiled, soft and sad. "That's different." "No, it's not." They sat in silence for a while. Outside, wind rustled through pine and ash. Finally, Elias said, "Why did you really leave?" Maria looked down. "Because I'm not what they want." "Hi, because I'm not what they want." "I don't have letters after my name. I don't belong to their world." But you healed me." No," she said gently. "You healed yourself. I only reminded you how." He leaned forward. Then let me remind them." That night, Elias slept on a cot by the fire. He dreamed not of hospitals or corridors, but of rivers that sang and trees that whispered names. In the morning, he woke to the scent of bread and broth. Maria handed him a bowl and said, "They'll be searching for you soon." Good," he replied. he replied. When he returned to the estate 3 days later, walking through the iron gates without support, the staff froze. The groundskeeper dropped his rake. Mrs. Caldwell whispered a prayer. Leonard rushed out in his robe, heart racing. Elias stood at the base of the stairs. I went to find her, he said. He said. Footy on. Leonard stared. You what? He followed her map. Through the woods. I walked. Leonard's mouth opened and closed. Why? Because I'm not afraid anymore, Elias said. Because you all looked at her and saw a maid. But she's more than that. She taught me how to speak to my own body. How to listen to it. Leonard's voice dropped. Do you understand how dangerous that was? You could have gotten lost, hurt. I already was, Elias said, eyes burning. Before her. The board reconvened within hours. Reporters swarmed the gates. A Langston heir found after disappearance. The headlines read, "A miracle recovery or reckless gamble?" Dr. Harlan returned, this time with legal paperwork. The foundation cannot condone unlicensed treatment, he said. Leonard cut him off. Then the foundation no longer represents my son's care. Harlan flinched. What are you saying? I'm cutting ties, Leonard said, rising. You never believed he could change. You only believed in what you could measure. Elias stood beside his father, trembling slightly, but standing. I'm not an experiment, he said. And she's not a liability. You're making a mistake, Harlan said. I know, Leonard replied. I made one 10 years ago. I let people like you tell me my son's limits. I won't make it again. The legal storm swelled. Media interest soared. Invitations from talk shows, magazines, medical journals, all wanted the boy who learned to walk, but Elias declined them all. He only wanted one thing, to bring her back. Maria returned to the estate quietly, without ceremony. Leonard welcomed her at the door. I've never apologized to anyone before, he admitted. Maria nodded. Then start now. Just listen. And he did. She was offered a full-time position, not as a maid, but as Elias's personal guide and mentor. Astaba. She refused. Titles aren't my concern, she said. Let me do what I do. So they agreed on a new title. Companion, she stayed. With her return, Elias's progress exploded. He began climbing stairs, then riding horses. One autumn afternoon, he sprinted through the orchard, laughing until he collapsed in the leaves. Maria sat beside him. You've outrun the ghosts. He caught his breath. He nodded. Then we'll keep running. But the world beyond the estate was watching. Medical boards issued inquiries. Interviews were requested. Lawsuits were threatened, then withdrawn. A powerful documentary team requested access, but Maria refused everyone. One journalist managed to send a letter. You've rewritten what we thought was possible. The public deserves to know how. Maria replied with a single line. The how is not mine to give. The why is already with them. But peace rarely lasts when eyes are watching. One December morning, a car arrived at the estate, unmarked, black, and silent. Two men emerged, one with a badge. Leonard met them at the door. Maria was summoned to the sitting room. Elias waited outside the door, heart pounding. We've received a petition, one man said, setting down a folder from a medical ethics group. They claim you posed as a therapist under false credentials. Maria's voice was calm. Arnoldo's voice was calm. Well, I never claimed to be anything I'm not. Still, the accusations are serious. There may be criminal charges for impersonation. I impersonated no one. The officer opened the folder. You worked under the title companion. That's not a legal designation. It wasn't meant to be. It wasn't meant to be. Where were you trained? A life. The man scowled. That won't hold in court. Elias burst into the room. Then charge me too. Leonard stood. So will I. The officer hesitated. You're interfering with a legal inquiry. Leonard stepped forward. No. I'm protecting the only person who ever helped my son live. The man looked at Maria. We'll be in touch, he said, then closed the folder and left. As the car drove off, silence settled over the estate. Maria turned to Elias. There will always be those who fear what they can't explain. He nodded. You don't. Then let's give them more to be afraid of. And somewhere deep inside that house, a plan began to form. A plan to prove that miracles are not magic. They're made, step by step, by those who never stop walking. Winter clung to the Langston estate with frostbitten fingers, painting the glass windows with delicate feathers of ice. Inside, the manor brimmed with quiet energy. Elias, now nearly 11, was no longer a fragile figure behind curtains. Wait. He rose each morning before the sun, stretched until his legs ached, then ran through corridors, gardens, and memory itself. But outside the walls, the storm brewed stronger. The legal summons came in February. The State Board of Medical Conduct filed an official complaint against Maria under the clause of unauthorized therapeutic influence, backed by the Ethics Committee, a coalition of foundation members, and several powerful medical lobbyists. Their demand, Maria be barred from providing unsanctioned rehabilitative assistance to minors. It wasn't just about Maria anymore. It was about control, ownership of hope, the right to define healing. Leonard hired a legal team, the best in the state. But even he knew the battle wouldn't be won in court alone. It had to be won in the hearts of the people who still thought miracles were fairy tales, and those who feared they weren't. It was Elias who spoke first. "We need to show them," he said one evening, standing beside the fireplace, voice clear, and not just what Maria did, but how it changed me. Leonard folded his hands. "You'd have to speak publicly. On record." "I know." Maria looked over at him. "Are you sure you want this?" Elias turned. "You taught me how to stand. Now let me do it for you." And so he did. Single video was recorded, no polished studio, no editing, just Elias in a chair, the old one, the same wheelchair he'd lived in for most of his life. He looked straight into the lens. For 10 years, I couldn't walk. Not because my legs were broken, but because no one believed they could move. He paused. Until someone did. He stood up. Slowly, deliberately. No background music. No applause. Just the sound of footsteps as he walked across the room and turned back to the camera. "What's up?" She didn't give me exercises. She gave me silence when I needed it. Stories when I was afraid. She believed when everyone else measured. Then he smiled. Within 3 days, thousands of letters arrived at the estate. From parents, from patients, from strangers who had felt unseen. People who had been dismissed, ignored, given up on. Maria's name trended globally. Some called her a fraud. Others, a prophet. But the tide had turned. A week before the hearing, Maria received a letter, handwritten. No return address. It read, "The world cannot categorize what it cannot contain. You are the reminder they fear, that love, not method, is the oldest medicine. Walk proudly." On the day of the hearing, Maria entered the courthouse in her usual gray coat, hair tied back. Elias walked beside her, head high. Inside, the room was full. Journalists, officials, doctors with degrees and eyes sharpened by skepticism. The judge was a tall woman with silver streaks in her hair and a face that had forgotten how to smile. The charges were read. Maria stood, hands clasped. "I never claimed to be a doctor," she said. "I never offered a cure. I only listened. I showed up when others didn't. I stayed. That was all." "Ah," the prosecutor sneered. "You manipulated a vulnerable child." Elias rose. "I was vulnerable. But I wasn't manipulated. I was seen."
For the first time, through the room. Rumors spread through the room. The judge turned to Elias. "Son, do you understand? Do you understand what you're saying?"
Yes," he replied. "I understand better than anyone here." He stepped forward, and without support, without fear, he walked the full length of the courtroom. Silence fell over the room like snow. When he reached Maria, he took her hand. The judge watched. Then, slowly, she removed her glasses. "This court recognizes the unique nature of this case," she said. "It does not fit the bounds of medicine or regulation. And perhaps that's the point." She closed the file. A case dismissed. Outside, the world erupted. Maria and Elias emerged from the courthouse to flashing cameras, shouts, cheers. But Maria kept walking, steady and calm, one hand on Elias's shoulder. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't give interviews. She simply returned to the estate, where the garden had begun to bloom early. Spring had arrived. Weeks later, A small school opened on the south end of the property, quietly. No press, no grand opening. It wasn't a school in the traditional sense. No grades, no uniforms, no lectures. They called it the House of Still Steps. Children who had been told never came from across the country. Some in chairs, some with tremors, all with heavy hearts. Maria didn't teach them with lessons. She sat with them, sang to them, told them stories, and she listened. Elias helped too, taller now, stronger. He walked with them every morning, sometimes fell, but always rose again. Leonard watched from his office, tears slipping down rough cheeks he no longer bothered to wipe away. He no longer wanted to buy miracles. He had one right outside his window. Years passed. Maria never changed much. Years passed. Still wore the same shoes. Still tied her hair the same way. But every child who came through those doors walked a little taller when they left. And whenever anyone asked what made her so special, Elias would answer the same way. She didn't fix me. She reminded me that I was never broken. And if you pass through the woods on a quiet evening, you might hear the laughter of children near the glade, where wildflowers grew around a small, crooked cottage, where belief still lived, and where miracles, real miracles, walked step by step on their own 2 feet.